So today we're going to take a look at how to make this simple fabric texture, and it's got a bit of gold thread in there and with a satiny background and this sort of rougher texture on top. We're actually not going to do exactly the same thing because I have to make another fabric for this project I'm working on, and you're just going to watch me do it and we'll do it together. But it'll be the same idea. It's also going to have gold thread, and you know, how smooth or rough you make your background is entirely up to you. The method is going to be exactly the same. The key thing here is that because it's a fabric, we've actually created here a subsurface output. And you can see I've got a light inside this cube. And you can see that as I bring that fabric thickness down, you can see more of the light from behind. In fact, I've made this little shadowed area to make it a little bit easier. And we can make the fabric completely opaque, or we can have, you know, that stuff shining through the background. And, you know, we have some subtleties happening with that. And, you know, if you imagine this actually put on like a fabric mesh as opposed to just this cube, I think it looks pretty good. Most of what we're going to be doing here, though, is in Photoshop. This is actually an incredibly simple incredibly simple material to make once we get into substance. And the only thing we're really going to have to sort of be mindful of is the way that we make our texture masks in Photoshop. So that's really where the secret sauce is as far as this kind of material goes. So without further ado, let's switch to Photoshop. Alright, so here we are in Photoshop, and I've got these 3 separate images that I swiped off of Google. You're also more than welcome to scan your own fabrics and make your own patterns, which is lots of fun, but I'm pressed for time. Now the key is whether you're downloading them or whether you're scanning them yourself is, you know, the more resolution you got, the better it is. And you'll notice we have 2 separate fabrics here. This isn't going to be a satin, but it is going to be a finer fabric, and then we're going to have this coarser fabric. Now, they're 2 completely different sizes, so we're going to have to do different stuff to them. This one was not a tiled texture, and we're going to have to turn it into that. So we might as well start with the lowest layer. So I hit Control A to get everything, and I'm going to just crop. And this is going to give us these clean borders. Now, we can, well, let's see how bad it looks. I'm going to go into Filter, Other, and Offset. And here we can set how much of an offset we want in any direction. And since this is a 2K map, we want to go halfway in either direction, so our actual seams are running across the middle right here. So it's actually pretty good. Let's take a closer look. You can see it right in here, and you can kind of see it right in here, but you got to look close, so this isn't going to be too hard. Now, there's a couple ways I can do this, you know, and I think I've even done a demo on just doing this. I probably should have done that first. I'm going to get rid of this layer mask. So this is going to be our original right here. And I'm actually going to offset it back again to what it was before. So we have an offset version lying on top of a not offset version. And I can come into my layer mask and get a brush tool. And you'll notice it switches from color to grayscale once you're in the layer mask. And we'll switch to a brush. And I don't want it too soft, but I don't want it too hard either. And since this is pretty good altogether, I'm going to make it precise. I'm just going to come in through here, and I'm going to try to get rid of those lines. And if the edges of your brush are too fuzzy, you see we're starting to get like some gradation in there, so you're kind of half seeing the stuff that's underneath. It's actually part of the original image. Looks like we're not the first people to do this. That's okay. And yeah, that line that came with the picture. I haven't touched this. I literally just pulled it off the internet. So somebody had seamed this up before. Yeah, let's offset it again. And that looks pretty good. I don't see any new seams. So we'll call this one done. I'm just going to merge these two layers. And I'm also going to turn it into a grayscale. So I'm going Image, Adjustments, Black and White. And this window lets me fine-tune the grayscales that I create. This is a pretty washed out material. It doesn't have a lot of color in it. But it's got some yellows and some reds. And we can see that we can actually pick up some of these colors and make them lighter or darker. And if you've got an image that's got more variation as far as color goes, you can actually really do quite a lot with manipulating the grayscale. In this case, we don't really have that much leeway. But I'm going to try to adjust these so I get as even a tone. So I'm thinking about these little dark spots in here as I can. I'm not worrying about how dark it is. I'm worrying about how even it is, because right now that's the most important thing that I can do. Those probably aren't going to do much now. Maybe this one. No, not even. Okay, I'm gonna use that. And we can always come back in here into the levels and clean it up a bit more. All right. This is going to be our basic normal bump for the material. And then we'll adjust it for other things. In fact, it's probably a little dark for our normal bump, but this will be like the darkest version of what we're going to need for our fabric. And next we're going to deal with this finer fabric. And this isn't nearly as good a texture. You'll notice that it's kind of fuzzy along the edges, and also it's not entirely even as far as the color goes. It's a little bit darker in through here. But I think it'll be a good exercise in sort of fixing up these questionable textures. And we're going to try to avoid using the fuzzy bits, and we're going to concentrate on the nicer bits. And we're going to use a combination of clone tool and layer masking. First thing I want to do, I kind of want to even up the color a little bit. I'm going to see whether I can't use a copy of this as kind of a, you know what, I'm just going to cut this in half, get rid of it. And I'm going to move it up against here, so it looks pretty even. But again, we got fuzziness there. You know, it looks a lot more even than I kind of imagined. I guess maybe optical illusion or something. Let's step back a couple of steps. And I'm going to clean off the nastier bits here like this. Yeah, it's not too bad. I mean, it's a little darker. So it's getting kind of cleaner towards the edges here. We kind of have to do the same thing again over there. Just going to make another one of these. And I'm lining them up exactly. I'm using my guides to line them up. Yeah, that's where the color issue is. But again, I don't know. I think maybe I'll just get rid of that bit. Yeah, it's pretty even in color. All right. And now we'll use our clone tool to improve on that even more. This bottom half is definitely darker. Oh, you know what? We have it set to, I want it set to all layers. And that's why you don't want it too soft, because you get those weird edges. I'm going to get my lasso tool in here, and I'm going to lasso off this bit right here, because it's a little bit dark, and we'll just really, really, really feather it and lighten it up. Oh, you know what? We only have the one. I haven't merged it yet. I can't really do that. We'll take care of it later. Alright, so we've gotten rid of, I don't like that up here. Alright, that's okay. Let's turn those into a single layer. And we can make another one. I want to see what happens if we flip this vertically. We'll probably end up with less problems in through here. And I'm going to get a layer mask, and let's use a brush to cut that out. And before we offset it, we're going to crop the image. That could be worse. I think I'm having better results with the layer mask. So I'm going to offset this back. I'm going to make a copy and offset it again now. So I have the one on the bottom is the original, and then we're going to offset the top one. And now I'm going to apply a layer mask. Yeah, I'm pretty satisfied with that. We'll merge them, and we'll offset it again, and that looks pretty good. Alright, so we now have our thinner weave, our thicker weave, and all we have left to do is our design. Now, I just stole this off Google, but you can also make your own designs, which is a lot of fun, but we're not going to do that here. Now, the fabric I'm imagining isn't going to have satin in the background, but it is going to have kind of this knobby pattern on it. So we'll use the rougher weave for the knobby pattern, and then we'll use the finer weave for the background. But I do want to put in some, whether we make it gold thread or colored thread, I haven't decided yet. But we're going to need a third area here, because as it stands right now, this makes a pretty good mask for height. Once we invert it, because I want my knobby bits higher. So why don't we just go ahead and do that now. And we've still got some artifacting in here, so let's get rid of that. And I like the way, you know, this line comes in the pattern here, so I don't want to ruin that. So I'm going to run my thread on the inside of these white areas. But before we do that, we should probably turn this into the right size. So that's a 2K map now. With something like this, it doesn't matter. You can scale it up. It's not really going to make a difference. We can smooth it out a bit. Let's start with the beginning. So I've got this set to non-contiguous, so it's going to pick up all the white areas, and I've set the tolerance really high, so any artifacting in there is just going to get wiped out. So it's just going to pick out our white areas here. I'm going to get another layer, and I'm going to hit select and mask, and let's check the quality of this line. I would like to see it smoother a little bit, and smooth it out. Maybe up the contrast. And essentially what we're doing is we are remaking this. We're just going to remake it with cleaner lines. So this first one, I'm going to fill with white. And we're going to add another layer. I'm going to select everything, and I'm going to fill it with black. And that's cleaned up our edges for us, so we've got nicer edges now. And the next thing I want to do is I want to create that line. So we'll get another layer, and this time I'm going to stroke the line. I think 6 pixels is probably good. Let's take a look. Yeah, that's a nice line. Except we now have this problem at the edges. Now, we could go in here and start doing these little things by hand. Yeah, the problem is this edge right here. If we offset it, it's going to give this line in through here, and we don't want that. I also really don't feel like coming in through here and doing this all by hand either. But because I've separated out this way, we can kind of do a little bit of a trick where it won't really be noticeable, and it'll kind of get rid of that edge for us. I'm going to hit Control T to get into the transform mode, and up here I can set the width and the height of my image. I'm also going to click on that link because I want them both to be the same. And I'm going to make it ever so slightly bigger. Let's see what happens if we do 100.5. Let's take a look at that edge. I'm still seeing a little wee bit of that line. So let's try 100.6. Ooh, not 1006. 100.6. Yeah, that's cut it off at the very edge. So I'll hit Enter. And I'm going to crop my image. And let's take a look and see what happens when we transform it now. It's not perfect. The angle is a little bit smaller than the other places, but honestly, I think it's certainly good enough. And we just saved ourselves about an hour's worth of work by doing that. So it works for me. So we have, I just want to make sure that it works along with this as well. So let's offset this and offset this. And I'm going to, we're getting a little bit of problematic stuff in here. But I'm going to let it slide. Oh, no, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do exactly the same thing. We're not going to let it slide. We're going to put these two back. I'm going to come back to this image here, and we're going to transform it in exactly the same way. We're going to make this 100.6 as well. And that should solve our problem. Yep. Excellent. Okay. So we've now got our masks done, except for actually turning them into PNGs. So I'm going to merge them with their new backgrounds. And we'll call this thread mask. That's which one? That's our nasty one. We're going to throw that one out. We're going to call this our pattern mask. Let's do some levels on this one before we save it. I want it much more black and white, just like the other one. Like that. And we'll call this fine weave. And we'll call this rough weave. Now, I'm going to make, we could use this pattern mask and make this the actual combination of the two weaves in Substance. I ended up doing it in here, but I'm going to keep these as separate full textures as well, because the last material I made, I didn't do that, and I was sorry. So these are going to be backups. And what we're going to do now is we're going to create a third layer where we're actually going to just create a single normal map. Well, it'll be like a normal mask. I don't know what we're going to call it, but we're going to base the normals off of that. The heights will be based off of this map because we don't want the heights too busy. So I've now got my rough areas selected. How am I going to do this? I think we're just going to do it like this. I'm going to use a mask just in case we don't like the result. And I got it exactly opposite. Yeah, well, that's why it's nice using a mask, because you can fix things like that real quick. So this is going to be what we're actually going to export out to our substance. And I'm going to group them together so if we want to, we can always fool around with them later, and we'll call this normal mask. And let's save them out. So I will save them to, yeah, I might as well save them to here. And we'll call this thread mask. All right, so now that we've got our masks built here in Photoshop, we can bring them all into Substance Designer.